All right, welcome to an exciting new series on the How to Get Started in Passive Investing YouTube channel. In this series, titled Partner Spotlight, the Powerhouse Operators Behind Impact Equity, we're diving deep into the partners that make impact equity a great source for new or newer passive investors. In our very first episode, I have the privilege of interviewing Zach Haptonstall, the CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Rise 48 Equity is a dynamic multifamily syndicator headquartered here in Phoenix, Arizona. And since they've launched in 2019, they successfully acquired almost $2 billion worth of assets in Phoenix and Dallas. What's truly remarkable is that they've completed 11 full cycle deals during this time, and they've doubled investor capital in an average of 18 months. I've personally invested with this company for 10 different ventures, and I partnered with them with Impact Equity on 7 different projects. And today, I'm really excited to share this insightful interview with you. I guarantee you'll be just as impressed with Zach as I am by the time we wrap up this episode. So sit back, relax, and let's get started.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Randy. Really excited to be here. I know you and I have known each other for a few years now, so great to be on your show. Really appreciate it.
Outstanding. Well, hey, why don't we just jump right in? Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your past, and how you came to the passive investing world?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little about me. So I was, born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just grew up like in a, lower middle class family, just kind of like a regular family, have no real estate background or anything like that. And probably like most of the listeners, I was taught you go to school, you get good grades so that you can get a good job and make good money. And that was kind of, the direction that I was going for. And so I got a journalism degree. I wanted to be a sports reporter. So I actually got a journalism degree. I was a live news anchor, sports reporter for Arizona PBS for a short time, which was really cool at first, Randy. And then I quickly realized you can't make any money in journalism. And I wasn't happy with it. It's not as fun when it's your job. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And I had student debt. I need to make money. And so I went into healthcare marketing, working for a hospice organization, which sounds kind of weird, but I would just wake up in the morning, drive all around Phoenix and walk in cold to like hospitals, doctors' offices, assisted livings, and build relationships with physicians, nurses, social workers. And when they had somebody who needed this hospice care, mobile nursing and caregiving, they call me and I'd be the first person to go meet with the family, educate them, get them signed up. And so It sounds weird, but it's a very, competitive and lucrative private business industry. And it's all funded 100% by Medicare. So it's free for the patient. And anyways, long story short, I was fortunate to do very well in that industry. And became, director of marketing, became a co-owner in the company. And by the time I was, 23, I'm making, 100K plus a year. I bought a house. I'm making more money than both my parents combined. I got my MBA at 24, paid it off cash. And so, by the time I was 26, I was fortunate to be making good money. I was financially established, making 200K plus a year with no debt. But I was very unhappy. Right. And I never wanted to be in healthcare marketing my entire life. It was supposed to be a short-term thing just to get financially stabilized. And so I was really in search of how can I gain control back of my time? Because I was just working crazy hours on call 7 days a week, just miserable. But I felt like I had golden handcuffs, and I didn't want to leave or didn't know what to do. And so, again, I had no real estate background, no rich uncle or any connection like that. But January of 2018, I resigned and I sold my equity in that company with no real plan. I just knew that I'm going to somehow create passive income through real estate. Okay. I had gotten my real estate license maybe a couple of years prior to that, but I never used it. It was just kind of a backup plan. And I knew nothing about investing, nothing about multifamily or syndication. I just learned. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, probably like you and most people, a month before I quit, and that was really big for me. I was like, you know what, I need to buy assets. I need to have my money working for me because I just want control back of my time. I mean, I'm making good money and I'm not happy. So what's the point? So I quit the job and I lived off of savings for over a year. And at first I was looking at, flipping homes. And then I was like, wait a second, that's transactional. It's kind of what I was just doing. That's not passive. Then I learned about passive income investing, learned about mobile home parks. And my goal was I had almost 300K of cash that I had relentlessly saved for years following the Dave Ramsey plan and got that pop of equity from selling out in that company. My plan was to try to buy my own little mobile home park on a seller carry with all my cash. I cold called over 90 different mobile home park owners here in the Phoenix metro. That didn't work out. And finally, I started listening to podcasts like this one and reading books and learned about multifamily and syndication, which I had never heard of this before. Okay,
Sure.
and the whole concept of raising money from other passive investors and leveraging my time and energy in order to benefit them made a ton of sense. And I was like, that's what I should do, because I knew that I was good networking with people, and I had a large network of physicians, healthcare business owners from doing my previous job, and I knew that all of those people also hated their jobs, but they were
Right.
going to, and they were stuck in it, and they had good money, but they don't know where else to put it. Right? I was like, that could be my thing. And so,
Sure.
anyways, long story short, from the day I quit the job, it was about 14 months until we closed the first deal. It was a 36 unit, $3.5 million property. And I met my couple partners through that time. And we then started syndicating after that, raising money. And now since then, we've acquired 37 different properties here in the Phoenix metro worth over $1.4 billion of real estate, over 6,000 units. We have, Rise 48 equity. We're also do all the management in house. Rise 48 communities of over 150 plus employees. So we've been very blessed, Randy, to kind of, probably like a lot of people listening to this, I was just in search of passive income and then found this whole other realm,
Yep.
which we were able to really scale in a short amount of time. So I know that was kind of long
So
winded. That's the background.
that is there's so much information in there. You could probably have 15 episodes of each year of your life throughout that process. But let's take a step back if we can. I'm curious, when you're making a couple $100,000 a year, you got your MBA, like you had arrived, as far as like any other 25-year-old that I've met, or most other 25-year-olds that I've met to this point. Like, what are your friends? What are your family? What is your network? What are they thinking? What are they sharing with you about this? Do they think you're nuts? Do they think you're crazy? How did that go?
Yeah, good question. It's a great question. So yeah, I think people were kind of questioning why I would do that, and they thought, and to be honest, like a lot of my quote unquote friends, I didn't really talk to a lot of people anymore from high school at that point, because I was just so laser focused on my goals. I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a lone wolf. You know what I mean? Just prior
Yep.
to that, and so I didn't really have any influences, negative or positive, on the outside, which I think helped me, in hindsight, because
Okay.
I didn't have the same goals as a lot of those people that I had gone to high school or college with. Didn't really talk to them. My parents, they weren't like super negative, but you could tell they were skeptical and like kind of like, what
Sure.
are you doing? You know what I mean? And they had no idea how real estate works or anything like that.
Of
And
course.
so yeah, I mean, as I started getting going, I think the deeper I got into it, Randy, at first, when you kind of tell people your idea, like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Like, you've been successful, you'll probably do well. But then month after month after month goes by, and
Yeah.
I was dating my now she's my wife, Grace. But at the time we were dating, I remember going to like some of her like, family events and meeting like family friends. And it's very
Sure.
embarrassing when somebody says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, well, I'm a real estate investor." And in the back of my mind, I know I haven't made any money in like
Right.
10 months, and I'm burning through my savings, lost
Yeah.
all my confidence, have no identity. Like, "Oh, really?
Right.
Like, what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I don't own any real estate yet, but this is what I'm doing." And you don't even want to get into it with people. You know what I mean? It's embarrassing.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a tough mindset. And I got to the point where at first I felt insecure. I didn't want to tell people. And then you get to the point where you don't care what anybody thinks. And I think once you kind of get to that point, that's when you can really just embrace a new identity, whatever it may be. And I think that was important.
Yeah, interesting. So and thank you for sharing that too. We don't always get into those type of details, but that, I would imagine that's a fairly lonely road. And you mentioned a term earlier. You said lone wolf, and I was somewhat of a lone wolf myself in corporate America, where you're kind of operating over here. Everybody else is doing something different, and it can be a hard place to be. But I'm curious, what kind of skills, what kind of mindset, what kind of learnings did you bring from that into this real estate investing space, or the transferable skills maybe that came across with that?
Yeah, 100%, 100%, Randy. So, I was always my whole life, I shouldn't say my whole life, but most of my life growing up, I was just naturally introverted, right? And not a
Okay.
social person, insecure, don't want to talk to other people. And when I started doing the news anchor thing, that
Yeah,
terrified me. Okay. I
I'm
was so
sure.
scared, but I knew I wanted to push my comfort zone. That was the first step. Then I went into outside sales, and that terrified me. Walking
Hmm.
into hospitals, talking to physicians when I'm in my early 20s, very
Right.
intimidating. You know what I mean? And but you get to the point where it's like you have in that sales job, I had so much pressure on me every single month. You know what I mean? It's like you could have the best month ever, and now it's start all over again because now you set a bar, you have to perform, and there's
Yeah.
nobody. You don't show up at an office. You got to go out. You got to wake up in the morning and you figure out your own schedule and you drive around and you
Hmm.
walk in cold on places and you build relationships. So I think that mindset. I was literally by myself every day, 50,
Hmm.
60 hours a week. Driving around, and of course I go talk to people at these buildings, but I don't have colleagues, to interact with or to relate to really. That's the
Yep.
lone wolf mindset, really. So I think that really helped me because it wasn't my business, but it's kind of an entrepreneur mindset where you
Hmm.
have to go create, right? And like basketball fans, you know that some people need a point guard to create a shot for them, and some people can create their own shot. And that's kind of how I compare this. Is like if you
Hmm.
want to go do this, you need to be able to create your own shot, and you need to make something happen out of nothing. And so you have to have that kind of that independent mindset and be able to proactive and pick up the phone and set up meetings and go make things happen. I think that's very important. And to your point, Randy, I think that's a good question. Is that you can take other skill sets and experience from other industries or education and apply it to this industry, right? Because you're
Right.
dealing with people, and at the end of the day, people and business is made up of people and relationships. And then it's just a matter
Hmm.
of like what is the business regarding. So I think that
Yeah.
was important.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you for that. I think it's important for people to think as, maybe they're sitting there at W-2 and maybe they want to be active in real estate. Maybe they don't want to be active, but really taking a good inventory of where your skills are and what that could translate into either from an active or passive standpoint. So I think that's a really important piece. So I'm curious now. So you end up spending 14 months. You probably heard no 100 times. You had LOIs that were declined or probably not even responded to many, many times. Um, you were going down the path of multifamily, or you shifted from from mobile home park over to multifamily. What drove that decision, and why did you land at multifamily compared to some of the other asset classes that are out there?
Yeah, great question, Randy. So when you're new, and many of you may be experiencing this now or have in the past, when you're new to this, whether you're passive or active, this applies to passive investors as well, is that real estate, you don't realize how much is involved with real estate. And there's so many
Mm-hmm.
avenues you can go down, right? You can do self-storage, you can do office, industrial, mobile home parks, and you really get shiny object syndrome. Okay. And that's what was
Right.
happening to me. I was like, oh, mobile home parks sound really good.
Sure.
Oh, multifamily sounds good. Self-storage sounds really cool. That sounds smart. And it's like you want to learn about all these different things. And I got to the point where I was getting overwhelmed myself. And I was like, wait a second. And what would happen too, Randy, is that I would go to one thing and I would say, oh, this is like way harder than I thought. This is super competitive, hard to
Sure.
break into. This is
Sure.
already, I missed the boat on this. I'm going to go to this other thing. And you start to realize everything's saturated, everything's competitive. Okay.
Right.
Because it's successful. There's going to be people attracting to it. And so I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Everything is really competitive. Mobile home parks are no easier than multifamily, but I liked the multifamily because I felt like you could scale a business at a larger scale with multifamily as opposed to mobile home parks. And when I
Yep.
look at things like with multifamily, you can really force the appreciation and push rents by renovating units, increasing the rents. Whereas with mobile home parks, you
Yep.
pretty much have to replace the entire trailer to do that, okay, to increase your
Mm-hmm.
rents. And so that you don't have as high of a ceiling. I like the tax benefits better for multifamily. And I thought that it was honestly, I was trying to think of this as how can I blow this up into a big empire? That, from the day one, that's what I was thinking. Is like, well, I
Okay.
have to be able to raise a lot of equity, which means I have to have a lot of investors. And
Yep.
mobile home parks kind of have this negative stigma, right? Which is not
Yep.
necessarily fair because there's a lot of nice, clean parks, and they can be a good investment strategy. But I was thinking for my investors, I think multifamily is more sexy, more attractive to be able to raise
Yep.
capital. So there was a variety of reasons, but I thought multifamily is tried and true. Okay, that's the most competitive. So be it. I just need to outwork
Yep.
everybody else. That was kind of the mindset.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you can be successful in absolutely anything,
Yeah.
but you can't be successful in everything. So you've got to pick a lane and get really good at the lane. So, yeah. So thank you for walking me through that. I know you've had this conversation with newer passive investors. I'm curious, are there certain things that you see come up time and time again with the new investor that maybe we could use this platform to help educate on the top two or three things you run into most commonly?
Yeah, great question, Randy. So, I think with a lot of newer investors, I think that, for the last several years or decades, there has not been a lot of exposure to these types of investments, right? I think
Hmm.
most of us, growing up in America are just kind of trained. You invest in the stock market, 401k, retirement funds, and that's it. Maybe you buy a single family home if you want to get really crazy, right? And rent
Right.
that out. And so I
Right.
think a lot of the investors that I speak to, because we have a lot of first time investors, are skeptical, right, and kind of hesitant because they don't understand this, and it almost sounds too good to be true to them, right? They're
Hmm.
like, well, wait a second, like why isn't everybody doing this? And I think that
Right.
a lot of people just don't realize is that these types of investment vehicles have not been available to people because typically it's large private equity institutions that are buying these deals, or you maybe
Hmm.
have to invest in a REIT. And you don't have the type of transparency and access to the operator that you would have by investing through a direct syndicator. So what I tell people is that I tell people all the time when investors are skeptical, I say, listen, you know, this is not like investing in like a tech startup or an app. Like, I'm not going to 10x your money in a year or two,
Hmm.
but we don't ever give promises. So I'm not giving a promise here, but I always tell people, we're probably not going to lose your money either because,
Hmm.
the way these deals are is that they're always highly occupied. They're cash flowing. It's where the bulk of the demographic lives.
Yep.
People have to have a place to live. And even
Yep.
in like economic downturns, like the 08, 09 recession, these types of properties were very resilient. And so I
Hmm.
think the good thing about this from both an active perspective and a passive perspective when you're new is that it's not rocket science. It's easy to understand, right? It's like the tenant or the resident has a job, okay? They're going to work, they're paying you for a place to live, and that money is flowing through to the investor, at its most basic premise. And now with where the country is shifting, where home ownership is not only less desirable just due to
Hmm.
cultural shifts or whatever, but it's also less attainable because of interest rates, because of the cost of private single family homes. People want to be remote; they don't want to get caught into a home or a 30-year mortgage. So,
Yep.
I think a lot of newer investors, they feel comfortable with these types of investments because it makes sense to them. And then it's just a question of, okay, does the investor believe and trust in the market and the operator, right? And what's their track record? Because I
Yep.
think that once you educate investors, it just makes sense. It's not like you have much more visibility in this, as you know, Randy, than you do even into investing in like a mutual fund because you
Of
just
course.
invested in 100 companies that you have no idea what's going on with them. A
Right.
CEO could send a tweet and tank your stock. So
Yep.
you just never.
Yep. Okay, yeah, thank you for walking through that. I think that's important, and certainly for the newer investor, I think half the challenge is just getting comfortable with the process and understanding how dollars flow, what is your involvement as an LP investor, and what to expect from the operator. Um, the thing I like about Rise 48, one of the probably just as much as the returns that I've been getting from Rise 48 is the fact that you guys are a fully integrated operator. You've got property management, you've got construction in house, because there's really just a couple of things that can go south in these business operations that could potentially put your investment at risk. So I'm curious if you could kind of walk through some of the things that Rise 48 is doing to make sure that those dollars the investor is wiring to you are as safe as they possibly can be in your hands, and you'll be a good steward with them.
Yeah, great question, Randy. And that kind of I'm going to kind of blend part of your last question into this question because I think they were both good questions. And so,
Sure.
to kind of break it down to the most basic, concepts for investors of what we do and what a lot of sponsors do across the country, and then I can explain how the vertical integration supports that. Is that we're essentially flipping these apartment buildings. Okay, so we're buying an apartment building, which maybe it does not have professional management in place. They're not optimizing the operations because each one of these apartment buildings is run like a business. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically tenants are paying their rent every month, which is producing revenue. And then you're essentially just like a business, there's a multiple to that revenue, which allows you to sell it for more than you bought it for,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than a single family home. And so what we're looking for is we're not only looking for properties that have upside with the operations, but we're looking for what we call value add, where we can go in there
Mm-hmm.
and we can take a property that was built in the 1980s and has old flooring, old appliances, old cabinets, and upgrade all those items, right? New
Yeah.
flooring, quartz countertops, stainless steel, so that you have a better product, you've improved the community, and it justifies a higher rent. And tenants are willing to pay that because they want a higher quality product. And when you increase the rent, you've increased the value of the property, right? That's really what we're doing at its most basic premise. and then selling or refinancing, or maybe we'll hold it long term and cash flow to the investors. And so, in regards to where your dollars are going, and then how the vertical integration really helps to support executing that value add business plan. So the way we
Mhm.
structure these deals is we create a new LLC for every single deal, which buys that one property. As a passive investor, when you're investing, you're actually buying shares or units of that LLC. So you have actual equity ownership percentage in an entity that owns the property. Okay, so as money is flowing into the LLC from the property, you're getting your pro rata share of that profit. Okay, and so that's kind of how you're protected. And most sponsors across the country will use what are called third party property management, right, where the
Yep.
sponsor raises the money from investors, and they use a third party company to do the on site management, maintenance, construction, execute the renovations. And we did that initially too. It's
Mhm.
most people will have to do that to start out. We've been fortunate to be able to scale in one market where we've created our own property management company, Rise 48 Communities, which manages all of Rise 48 equity assets. So all of the
Mhm.
on-site staff, maintenance, leasing managers is our staff, our full-time salaried employees. We do the construction management in-house. Okay, so
Mhm.
our salaried staff is sourcing, bidding out, managing vendors, and we control our supply chain by purchasing all of our materials directly wholesale through a warehouse. So all of our
Yep.
flooring, countertops, appliances, everything. So what it does is it eliminates middlemen. It allows us to get a lot of efficiencies, not only from just an execution operation perspective, because
Mhm.
the construction is talking to the on-site management and they're on the same team, but we're getting wholesale buying power, right? And
Yep.
we've been able to kind of create a model or a blueprint. We can just rinse and repeat and stamp out unit after unit with
Yep.
the same renovation crews, the same materials, the same type of property in the same market. So we've reduced a lot of the execution risk, all right, because we've already kind of ironed it out. So for us, it's about how do we create systems and processes that we can repeat over and over. And that's what we've
Mhm.
been able to accomplish. And, what people will learn as a new passive investor is that, when you're investing in a larger apartment building as compared to a single family home, you're getting the benefits of economies of scale, right? And
Mhm.
so we're basically just exponentially increasing our economies of scale advantage by bringing everything in house.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you for walking through that too. I think the integration that you guys bring, it gives you the ability to have control of more pieces of that business plan. And as a betting guy, I want to put the control in the guy who I have the most faith in completing that business plan. And you've shown time and time again here that you guys can do that. So, um, looking at the portfolio today, you guys have a very large footprint here in the Valley, Phoenix, for those that are outside of Arizona. With the changes that are going on in the marketplace, the lending space, can you talk about the current state of the existing portfolio? And for those investors that might already be invested with you, how comfortable and confident are you that business plan will continue to execute? Distributions continue to get sent, and potentially new deals even coming down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So to give already some context, we've purchased a little over 6,000 units since we've
Mhm.
started, about 37 different assets, all in the Phoenix metro across 5 different cities, which is Phoenix, Glendale, Mesa, Scottsdale, Tempe. We've sold 11 of those deals, a little over 1,000 units. Right now we have about 27 properties, over 5,000 units currently under management. We can get to any of those properties in 30 to 40 minutes. Okay, and
Love
for
it.
those of you
I
who
love
aren't familiar, the Phoenix metro is like the Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the country by population. Okay, so it's a very large city, a lot of people coming here. And so, yeah, to answer your question about the portfolio, so in the last six to what are we at 6 to 8 months now since these interest rates really started hiking up in March of
Mhm.
2022. The great thing is that we've had no issue hitting our pro forma rents across the entire portfolio. So we're still hitting our projected rents. Leasing demand is very strong. We've had no issues with our supply chain. And the reality is there's not enough supply of housing for all the people coming here. Okay, so
Yeah.
that is in our favor. However, with interest rates increasing, so quickly, what we've done and what most people have done the last several years is what's called adjustable or floating interest rate debt. Okay, meaning
Yeah.
that your interest rate is a combination of two things. The lender has a spread, which is like a margin, their profit margin, which is fixed; it doesn't change.
Mhm.
That margin floats over what's called the SOFR index.
Mhm.
As the Fed continues to raise interest rates, and at the time of this recording, Randy, they just did a 75 basis point increase today, as you know.
Yeah.
As the Fed keeps raising that Fed funds rate, there's a positive correlation to SOFR. So SOFR keeps raising, right? So what's happening is that our monthly mortgage payment for the apartment building has been rising every single month. But what we've done on the front end of these deals is that we've purchased what's called an interest rate cap. Okay. And we show investors on the front end of the investment, we have an interest rate sensitivity analysis, which shows investors, hey, this is what your return looks like with different scenarios of interest rates. In the worst case scenario, if it goes to the cap, this is what your return looks like. So they know, okay, I still like that return. I want to invest. Or they say, I don't want to invest. We've now hit the interest rate cap on every single deal. Okay.
You have.
On every single deal in the portfolio, we've hit the interest rate cap. And that's pretty much the case across the country. From what I'm hearing from people. Yeah. This increase that we've seen from March 2022 to now, as of today, it's November 2nd that we're recording this 2022. It's the fastest interest rate increased in this short amount of time since the 1980s. Okay, so over 40 years, we haven't seen this type of an increase. And so, as far as our portfolio, fundamentally, the market is still very strong. Like I said, we're still seeing strong leasing demand. We're hitting our projected rents. In our underwriting model for all these deals, it's always a 5-year conservative stress tested model. Okay, so for every deal since we started the company, long before this interest rate recession came about, we're assuming in our model that we buy a deal, there's immediately going to be a recession where the organic rent growth plummets immediately and stays there for 5 years. Vacancy increases, stays there for 5 years. And that even with that downturn, we hold through the recession, execute our business plan by renovating 100% of the units, then sell in year 5. That's how we underwrite the deals. Well, in the last few years, Randy, as you know, because you've been in a lot of these deals, is that in reality, we'll blow through 30 to 50% of these interiors renovations in like the first 9 to 12 months. Then we hit the brakes. We stop renovating because we wanted to leave classic units or meat on the bone for our sale for the next buyer. Where we've said, hey, we've renovated 50% of units. We got a $300 rent increase. We've approved the concept. And if you want to buy this, Mr. Buyer, you can do the same thing. That allows us to sell the deal at a lower cap rate to get a high valuation, open up our buyer pool to more value. That's what we've been doing in reality. Well, now, to answer your question about how are we adjusting, how is this affecting our portfolio? Well, now, because interest rates are so high, this market in Phoenix and across the country the last 6 months has completely shifted from what was a seller's market, where sellers had the advantage the last 5 to 7 years, to now a buyer's market. Because because basically values are down in the short term because the interest rates are so high. You can't get to those higher purchase prices because your debt is more expensive. So we are now planning to renovate 100% of units on all of our portfolio. Okay, there was probably 3 or 4 deals we bought last summer where we had gotten through 30 to 50% of interiors, and we stopped at the beginning of this year because we were positioned to sell. We've now fired renovations back up, and we're going to start renovating. And the purpose of that is because we want to maximize the revenue and the NOI across the property so that by the end of next year, at the worst case scenario, if we can't sell it, early. And again, the longest deal that we've owned right now, we've only owned it for about 18 months. Okay. And these are 5-year holds, 5-year projections. We've sold everything prior to what we bought from June 2021 till now. Okay. We've sold the other deals besides that. And so, I've been telling investors, and I can't go into, LP returns due to SEC regulations, but, we've been hitting 5-year projections on average in about 18 months across the deals that we've sold. I'm telling investors going forward, it's going to be taking us at least 24 to 36 months or more to hit the same returns we were hitting in 12 to 18 months because interest rates are higher. So your debt is more expensive. And what we're seeing across the country right now is a normalization of organic rent growth where, the huge surge of organic rent growth that we saw post-COVID is starting to slow down now that we've hit 2022. And so because of those two reasons, hold periods are going to take a longer period of time. But even if we can hit, our 5-year projections in 3 to 4 years, that still drastically exceeds the 5-year projection. And again, we always tell investors it's a 5-year projection. So I think that, across the portfolio, we feel very confident, Randy, in the Phoenix market, in our portfolio. We're still looking for new deals, where they can make sense. I think that we're starting to see a lot of those Class A tenants we think are starting to now trickle down into our Class B space. Okay. Because I think that the last 3 to 4 years, the market was so strong, the economy was great. And you had a lot of building of new Class A apartments. Well, the cost to build is so expensive, as many people know, it's well documented, supply chain issues, et cetera. In order to make those new build deals pencil, you have to command premium rents, right? Well, in a
Yeah.
good market, that's fine. But now that inflation has stayed so high for so long,
Mhm.
this is my last point, and then I'll let you get your
Okay.
next one, Randy. I know I'm going on here, but now that inflation stayed so high for so long, a lot of those tenants have their average daily living costs have just kind of engulfed them, and so now we're starting to see
Sure.
those people trickle down to a more affordable space, which is what we do, is like a B class workforce housing. So
Yep.
we feel like we're in a phase where we basically just need to weather the storm, maintain high liquidity at the asset levels, continue to
Yep.
renovate the plan. So the business plan is not changing. If anything,
Yep.
we're going to pick up on the accelerating the renovations,
Sure.
and just go through our initial plan because it was a 5-year stress test.
So I'm curious then if there, not that the business plan has changed, but maybe the actual execution and the timeline has changed. It puts a heavier emphasis on your construction team and puts, increases the dependability or the emphasis on the effectiveness of that team. So
Yep.
I'm curious, have there been a lot of changes within your organization, or are you investing more heavily in that division? What kind of changes are you making there to satisfy that need, I guess?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think the last several years, anybody could buy a deal, and you're going to have organic appreciation, cap rate compression. You don't even have to
Yep.
renovate units, and you're going to get a good
Right.
return, right? And it makes
Right.
everybody look smart. And we've been, big benefactors at ourselves. But I think going forward, that the stronger operators are going to separate themselves to be able
Yeah.
to, truly stay on schedule and on budget. And so, yeah, for us, I mean, we just got our GC license, so we're going to be
Mm.
starting to bring in construction in house as far as the skilled labor. We've been using 9 or 10 different construction companies to do skilled labor. Then we do the construction management in house. We're not
Okay.
really changing anything that we've done as far as our supply chain because that's already been very strong.
Mhm.
We just put in orders this week, for a couple more properties, and we're really,
Mm.
buying more materials further in advance so that we have a stockpile of flooring, quartz
Awesome.
countertops, cabinets, etc. So we'll
Mm.
have that good supply and inventory in place. And then, operationally, we're always trying to get better and improve, right? Because
Mm.
we've been buying a lot of deals at a fast pace, and we're always trying to hire new people and build out those different processes. And so I think that, not necessarily because of the interest rates, but I think just organically the evolution of our company, we are building out more infrastructure, and that was always the
Yeah.
plan. To just keep getting
Yeah.
stronger from like an asset management perspective on site. I mean, we now have 3 full-time salaried corporate leasing staff who
Mm.
they are just at the off corporate leasing office every day here. I'm sorry, the corporate office, and they're basically giving support to the on-site management staff where they're taking online leads,
Mhm.
scheduling tours, getting on the phone, scheduling tours so that
Mhm.
the on-site manager can focus on touring and converting those leases on site instead of having to be on the phone all the time. You know what I mean? So we're trying to give
Yep.
more support, and that's a big advantage that we have right now, Randy, and why we did the in-house management is
Mhm.
that third party property management is a very crappy business model. Okay. You cannot make a
Right.
lot of
Right.
money. Okay. So it's
Right.
very hard for them to provide extra resources that benefit the property because they have to make a profit, and they cannot afford to compensate quality talent is just the reality of it. And that's part of the reason
Right.
we had to transition away from it. So for us, we started the property management company not to make money. We just needed to break even. We wanted to
Mhm.
support the operations. So there's a lot of things that we do where we have, very lucrative incentives for leasing, for different metrics, for not only the on-site property managers, but for our regional managers. We do
Yep.
biweekly in-depth meetings, which take about 3 hours with our regional directors and our VP of
Mm.
operations. We go through every single deal. We go through the entire P&L, the business plan, how's the
Mhm.
staff. In the last 2 weeks, I personally have visited every single one of our properties, 27
Wow.
properties. And I don't tell anybody I'm coming. I just pop in there. I hit
Sure.
9 yesterday. I had nine properties yesterday. I just want to pop in and just say, hey, how's it going? And, not to
Yeah.
scare them, but
Right.
that's probably like a residual effect to hold them accountable. But
Sure.
it's to be
Sure.
positive. Say, hey, you're doing an awesome job. Keep it going. Like I noticed you got 5 leases. We've got a
Yeah.
group email chain. We got a group email chain. We had like an October leasing initiative where we're just bonusing, our staff very heavily, which is good because it
Mhm.
incentivizes them. And
Sure.
every time somebody gets a lease, they post a photo and the whole company sees it. And I reply to every single lease. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are probably getting sick of it, but that's the kind of stuff where you can create culture, and it creates competition where you've got 27 different assets with 27 different teams that
Sure.
want to get recognition. And we had our all staff meeting a couple weeks ago. We showed all the people that got promoted. We showed these are the properties performing the best. These are the ones that need to step it up. So it's like
Yep.
we've tried to create this accountability and
Yeah.
competition internally, which has helped a lot. So there's little things like that that we're trying to really focus on.
Yeah, I love it too. And I mean, ultimately, you have developed a very, very large organization. in a relatively short amount of time. And the things that I'm seeing your organization doing, not only from you do employee appreciation days quite regularly. I see those things. I'm seeing a lot of activities at the site level or at the unit level. So you're getting the communities involved as well. And I think I saw something earlier this week where there were some Zach impersonators running around the office with, Zach ties and stuff on. So it seems like you're really creating a very fun, high performing culture. So it's neat to see that, but I'm curious, like, how do you maintain that, and what does the future look like for the organization, and how are you inspiring and leading those groups to do the great things you're doing?
Yeah, no, great question, Randy. And yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a cliche, right? People throw around the word culture, and people are like, what does that mean exactly? What is leadership? What is
Yeah.
culture? And I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert on culture or leadership. I mean, what do I know? But I was able to, again, kind of like we were talking about earlier. When I was working for a hospice organization, I became a president and co-owner of a hospice organization. We quickly scaled that company from 50 to 110 employees, and then sold it in 18 months. That gave me a lot of good experience of like quickly scaling different industry, obviously, but scaling, being a leader, so to speak, or a role model. And so the way that I see it, what I try to do, and what I tell our managers to do, because we've got multiple directors and then managers and then staff below them, is that you have to lead by example, right? And so if I'm putting out my best effort, if I'm getting here before everybody every day, and if I'm the last one to leave, they know what car is yours in the parking lot. It sets a
Sure.
tone. You don't have to say
Sure.
anything. I mean, it sets a tone where
Yeah.
that's the expectation, is that, hey, if the top level is working hard and they truly care, well, then I want to work hard. And then you got to bring energy. You got to hold people accountable. And we made that very clear in our all staff meeting a couple of weeks ago. My message to everybody was that we want to be the best at what we do, and we need elite people. You don't have to have elite talent, but you need to have an elite work ethic.
Yeah.
And that really resonates with people. And I told people too, I said, this is not a corporate structure. Like, we'll promote you in 3 or 4 months if you're doing very well. But
Yeah.
we're also not going to keep people around who are not performing well. So,
Yeah.
there's a sense of pressure and accountability, but it's how you do it. We don't want to be, constantly bombarding people, but if people need to improve, you let them know, like, hey, like, I'd like to see this. And there's a way to do it, and it's
Mhm.
tough. And we're learning too. I mean, it's difficult, but I think as you start to scale, one person or two or three people, Bikram, Robert, and I, we can't do it on our own. And so,
Yeah.
we're constantly trying to find very strong leaders, with a
Mhm.
skill set, because we've got multiple departments. We've got investor relations, marketing, asset management, operations. We have a financial planning and analysis department. Each one of those departments has a director and
Mhm.
managers and associates below them. And,
Yeah.
and so you have to find the right person to manage that staff, and that's
Yeah.
very key. And on LinkedIn, everything looks grand and jolly. Well, we've fired people when they're not performing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like, if you're
Sure.
not going to perform, we will cut you, because we're
Yeah.
trying to be the best. So I mean, I think it's all about what you want to create. And at the end of the day, though, it's like, if the ownership starts to slack off, people will see that, and it's going to
Yeah.
resonate throughout the entire company. So Bicker and I were just talking the other day, is that I think the challenge that we have now as an organization is that the last 2 to 3 years, we've been full speed ahead, and we've been buying deals. Everybody's busy, everybody's motivated. There's an adrenaline rush. Well, now
Yeah.
things are slowing down. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's like, how are we going to improve when we're not buying deals? What are we going to focus on to improve the company? Okay. Who's going to
Mhm.
stay motivated? And as ownership, we need to show that we're still motivated and that we're holding people accountable, because we don't want people to get complacent and
Yeah.
stop working hard, right? Because we show up to this office every single day. And so
Sure.
that's something that you have to really kind of keep in mind.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you've proven you've been a good steward of the Smith household's finances to a large extent. We love Rise 48. We have drank the Kool-Aid, and we've obviously we have stated a large portion of our business with Rise 48 as well. So um, we appreciate the partnership up to this point, and excited to see what you guys are doing, and have full confidence in everything that you guys are doing there, and have been very loud advocates of the entire Rise 48 community. So thank you for all that you're doing there.
No,
So
thank you. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I would definitely want to be cognizant of your time. I do have a couple of questions I'd love to ask that I ask all the guests on the podcast. For the passive investor who's getting just getting into this space, do you have any suggestions or ideas or educational content or resources that you would suggest for the new passive investor?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's tough because I think it can be overwhelming. I think the good thing in to the advantage of a passive investor who's new is that there are a lot of resources out there. So I think that you really should start to consume podcasts, like this one, and other several other podcasts. That's what I did initially.
Yep.
There's like audiobooks, different books you can find online, and just I think you need to first understand the asset class that you're interested in. Okay. If you're going to
Yep.
invest in multifamily, understand how that works. You don't have to be an expert, but understand on a high level how it works. If you're going to invest in self storage, what are the pros and cons of self storage, right? And then you need to try to focus on, okay, what are some of the best markets for this asset class
Yep.
that I think that are strong and insulated, and how does that match your goal? Like Phoenix, for example, as you know, Randy, firsthand, is not a very high cash flow market, but it's a large equity multiple market. You can grow the money quickly. You're not going to get as high a cash flow during your investment as like a market like Dallas.
Mhm.
Dallas, you'll have higher cash flow, but you're probably not going to have as high of a multiple on the back end due to property taxes, insurance, things like that. And so,
Yep.
what is your goal as an investor? And then try to find a market that aligns. And then after you've kind of identified those two things, then you want to start to vet operators, right? And I think, you can go on a website. Hopefully, some of the operators you're looking at have been on podcasts, so you kind of get a little bit about them that way.
Yep.
But hopefully they're available where you can set up a phone call with them and start vetting them. And I think as a passive investor, a new one, I think it can be very intimidating, right? To
Mhm.
reach out to a sponsor who is supposedly an expert, they
Mhm.
appear to be one online, but who knows? But I
Right.
think that you have to kind of be vigilant, right? And if
Yeah.
if they want your money, if they want to raise money from you, then they should be willing to talk to you, or at least somebody from there. So you
Yep.
should reach out to them, kind of vet them on what they do, and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different podcasts now, so many different books. And I think that if you just start to Google, stuff, that you can really learn a lot. And I think you have to be careful because, as you know, Randy, I mean, there's just, somebody could be on one podcast and then be perceived
Mhm.
as an expert, right? So it's kind of like you
Yep.
need to kind of dig in, like what's their track record,
Yep.
what have they done, and
Yep.
things like that.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on the podcast walking through that due diligence process and the operator and the markets and the deal.
Yeah,
But I think you said it right. Like get to know the actual people that are doing the work and being the stewards of your money. Make sure you know, like, and trust them, and follow them for a while. You don't have to jump into that first deal right away.
right.
You have been very, very gracious with your time. I joke with folks, like, literally I feel like I could text you. Not that I'm encouraging folks to get your phone number and text you 24 hours a day, but definitely you have always been available, and you've been an educator and a trainer at heart. So that's always been very valuable. So let's, if we can, real quick, fun question. I'm
Sure.
curious, is there a bucket list item other than, purchasing 37 apartment complexes here in Phoenix? Is there a bucket list item that you've recently checked off your list?
Oh man, recently checked off my list. That's a hard one, Randy, because I don't really keep a bucket list, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, getting a deal was like a big monkey off my back. The first deal
Yeah.
was a big one. You know what? I never I've never like said this is a bucket list item or whatever, because I don't really make that list. But one big goal of ours was, we wanted to be the number one buyer in the state, in the market. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because when you're competing and you're growing, you see all these other groups, and you want to be that group. And so recently, we became the number one buyer of apartments in Arizona in the last 12
Wow.
months. We passed like Blackstone and some of these large companies. So that was really exciting and kind of cool, because when you're in it, it's just a constant grind. You're just going full speed. You don't even realize it. You don't think of
Yeah.
yourself that way. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just try to
Yeah.
stay focused, humble, and deal by deal, and then you stay consistently doing that over time. It's kind of cool to see when you look back and take some time to reflect. Hey, we're pretty competitive in this market. So that was kind of cool
Sure.
to be one of the top buyers.
Awesome. Awesome. And congratulations. That, to be the largest buyer in Arizona, that is just absolutely amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious, if it's not a bucket list item, that's okay. But what's next for you and for Rise 48 then?
Yeah, good question. So, we want to continue to build out infrastructure and strengthen the team. Like right now, the emphasis really is on operations,
Yeah.
because we can't really buy a lot of new deals, or at least the pace is slowed down. So we're trying to see, okay, how can we improve what we do now? Because one of the big, like, we always kind of have a chip on our shoulder, Randy, because it's like when we were buying deals. At first, it's like, well, you have no experience, you have not gone
Right.
full cycle on a
Right.
deal, right? You're new,
Right.
you're worthless, you've never done this.
Right. Right.
Then you sell 11 deals and you go full cycle, so that they can't say that about you. But now it's like, oh, well, you guys had perfect timing. You're lucky. You're in a
Of
good market.
course.
You never been through a downturn, right? Well, now
Right.
we're going to go through a downturn, and for us, we see it as a big challenge where
Yeah.
we want to perform well during the downturn. We want to
Yeah.
outperform all the other sponsors in the country, frankly,
Yeah.
and not to put it in their face or anything, but so that in 3 or 4 years from now, when we come out of it, we can show investors like, hey, we did go through a downturn and we
Yeah.
performed well. So it's like the focus is, let's do everything we can to show that we're not just this, spur of the night thing, or whatever
Yeah.
the phrase is, caught lightning in a bottle and got lucky.
Flash in the pan. Yep.
Exactly, Fashman. We're not just an acquisitions company. We're a true
Yeah.
operator who can perform in good markets and down markets, and that we're truly, like you said, a good steward of the money. So that's important. And then prior to earlier this year, the goal was to try to go to a new market next
Okay.
year. We've had the equity demand for probably over 2 years to go to another market. A lot of investors are asking. I talked to an investor a couple of days ago. They
Yeah.
were like, "Hey, I've invested in 10 deals with you. We love you guys, but we don't want to keep investing so much money in one market. We want you to
Yep.
diversify." And so earlier this year, the goal was to go to Vegas next year. Now in 2023, now that there's been a downturn, this recession coming, we don't want to touch Vegas. We don't think the workforce is diversified enough. We don't think it's going to perform well. So we're looking at potentially Dallas. We just started in the last few weeks talking to different people, but going into this economic uncertainty, we're not going to just go to another market, for the sake of it. You know what I mean? We
Yep.
want to make sure that, we truly can understand everything, that it makes sense, because maybe this isn't the best time, but, we do feel like we have the demand. And as you know, Randy, we've always been kind of my last point of goals for the company direction is we've always been retail investor equity. We've always raised money from
Yeah.
retail investors, meaning, regular people investing 50 to 100K. We have hundreds of investors in each deal. And we love that model. That we always want that to be our primary model. But
Mm-hmm.
we also want to have a hybrid arm to the company where we're doing like private equity joint ventures, right? Because we've
Nice.
had a lot of groups talk to us. We feel like we can scale in other markets that way, where we still have our retail base, but we also have this
Mm-hmm.
private equity arm where we can do JVs as well. And so,
Love it.
that's going to be a focus. But right now, a lot of those things I think are on pause or slow moving because of interest
Mm-hmm.
rates, the economy. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Awesome. Well, I am super excited to see what Rise 48 does next. I've really enjoyed the path with you guys over the last couple of years and the returns that both myself and my investors are already getting from you. So I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're extremely busy. So thank you so much for spending time and bringing so much value to our audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, of course. Thanks so much, Randy. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out anytime, of course.
Awesome. And to our listeners, what I'll say is just, I would encourage you to reach out to Zach and the team at Rise 48. Zach I personally am invested in 9 deals with them. Impact Equity, we have partner raised in a couple of deals with them as well. And he is truly the partner to work with as you are new or continue to grow your passive investing strategy. I don't think there's anybody better in the marketplace to partner with, and could not say enough good things about him. So connect with Zach, and we appreciate the time that you guys spend with us. Again, as always, your goal should be to get as educated as you possibly can to gain the confidence and the inspiration to invest in that first deal. And once you do, I am confident that you'll see the returns and be happy with the process and continue to grow your passive investing income. So thank you again for being on the show with us. And we look forward to having you guys with us on another episode. Thank you.